Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Today, we are so thrilled to have Alyx Coble-Frakes with us. Alyx is a badass, so we'll start there. We're so psyched to have her on here. She's a social entrepreneur with over a decade of experience in business and health and wellness. This is what's so cool. She's the founder of The Agenda, where she empowers women and menstruators to unlock the wisdom of their cycles to show up more vibrantly in every area of their life. Alyx's passion stems from her own journey of recognizing how cyclical patterns impacted her productivity and motivation. And now she's on a mission to help others discover this powerful connection. I've been watching you since you created this. We were just talking about this here a second ago. Welcome to the things we know.
I'm so excited to be here. I've been fangirling. I'm so excited.
Oh,
Let's
I'm
go.
so happy to have you. So we were talking about this before we started recording, and you and I went through the Health Coach Institute together to get first we got certified as health and life coaches, and then we went on to get our master coach certification. You also worked there for a tiny bit, but then realized your purpose was bigger than that and started the agenda. And I cannot wait to dig into all of this with you.
Yay. Thank you. I'm so excited. Yeah.
Yay.
Yay.
And it's called the agenda period or the agenda?
We go by both. We're trying to be
Okay.
subversive. The way we actually named it was I was like, because it was originally a physical planner. And I was like, I needed it to be like the plan, like the agenda. Yeah, like the feminist
Yes.
agenda. Yeah, like period.
Yes.
And then so people, because the idea was I wanted women in corporate America to be able to take it into their office without someone being like, you're talking about your menstrual cycle. We don't need that. I wanted it to kind of be subversive and also this plan for women and menstruators to take with them as they were navigating life, being a cyclical person in a very linear world. And so, yeah, we accept either and all, but we really think of it as the cheat code for women and people with periods.
Love it. I love
So
it. So
cool.
Alyx, I was just saying to you before we hit record, I remember seeing you present. I didn't remember where from, but and also I'd heard such great things, but I just remember thinking and having people around me going, why hasn't someone thought of this before? Like how to plan their life around their cycle. It makes so much sense. And we know why, because we've kind of adapted to this linear model that really doesn't fit more than half the population. And actually, I kind of tend to think all humans are more cyclical. But I want to start with your story. So, what inspired you to focus on cycle syncing? And could you explain that a little bit since we jumped right in? And how did that lead to, you creating this really cool business?
Yeah, thank you. This is a great question. I'm what I like to call an accidental periodpreneur. So I call all of us in this space periodpreneurs, just because I'm let's make it as wild and crazy and in your face as possible. So, but I didn't mean to start a period company. And in fact, my 10-year-old self would probably be mortified that I was starting a period company. This was not on the roadmap. I've got a business degree. I had a lot of great opportunities to travel. I lived in Peru for a couple of years. I was a Peace Corps volunteer, came back. I worked with a lot of nonprofits. So there's always been a thread of education, even in my work in business, that's been really important to me. And then I realized that I was a terrible employee because all of my bosses wouldn't immediately adopt my great genius ideas. And I thought, you know what? I should be my own boss because these people are not keeping up with the times over here. So I started a health coaching company. I went through HCI, thought that provided such a fantastic foundation for me. But kind of with my background in business, I was tracking my sales conversions as I was starting out. And I was highlighting the people who said yes in green, which was, I was like, green, money, power, let's go. And then as months went by, I started to see these clumps of green together on my sales sheet. And then a bunch of white, meaning people had not converted into clients. And I was like, what the heck? What the heck is going on over here? And I found that I had higher sales during the ovulation phase of my menstrual cycle. And I was
Wow.
like, what? So I had learned about cycle syncing. I had heard about changing how you exercise and how you eat, but I hadn't heard anyone in the sales process talking about this as an application for business. And I got really curious about why that was happening or wasn't happening. And I also kind of thought maybe I'm crazy. So I researched to see sales with ovulation to see if there was anything online. And I found one study. It was of exotic dancers, and everyone they studied in the cohort made more money during ovulation and up to 30% more.
Wow.
So they all made more tips during ovulation, every single person in the study.
Wow.
Oh.
And I was like, damn, girl. Okay, is this a swearing podcast? I forgot to ask that.
It's
Okay.
always
Okay.
explicit.
I thought so.
I thought you listened.
I have, but then I always get really nervous about
Okay.
my own. I'm like, can I say this? But yeah, I was like, seriously, why are we not talking about this? Because obviously there's a huge business use case for this. And from there, it kind of devolved from there. Yeah.
So
Wow.
I was gonna ask this a little bit later, but for those of you who are not watching this on YouTube, you have a shirt on that says, "Is it attraction or is it ovulation?" So since we're talking about the sales aspect during ovulation, tell me about that shirt.
This shirt is so important because I had girlfriends all the time be like, oh my God, I just met this man. First day, he's so hot. He's amazing. He's everything I ever wanted. And I'll be like, what phase are you in the cycle? Just like, I'm super curious. Like, what phase are you in? And they'd be like, why? Why do you want to know that, Alex? And I was like, I'm just like super curious. And they'd be like, ovulation. And I was like, cool. If you feel like this about him in 2 weeks, green lights. If you don't feel like this about him in 2 weeks, maybe pump the brakes a little bit. And my friend called me back. She's like, yeah, he's not as cute as I thought he was. And I was like, yeah, must have been ovulation. Because during like the thing in sales and also the thing
ovulation goggles.
The ovulation goggles are so real. And it's because your body wants to be pregnant, even if your brain doesn't want to be pregnant. Your body's like,
oh my God,
let me make a person. And everyone else around you is like, she can be impregnated right now. Let me go talk to her. Because humans are animals, right? We just want to pass on our biological material at the end of the day, which is weird.
And that is so interesting because you hear that all the time about animals, right? You hear that all the time about like it's keeping let's say a girl dog home when she's ovulating, right? I've never I have never ever thought of that. That is amazing. So good.
So you can see like that's why it has such a huge implication for our sales. And then I was like going on some dates. I was just recently divorced. I was out on the dating apps and I got really into the weeds with somebody about ovulation and like the luteal phase and all the different phases. And I was like, well, you'll just have to, they're like, you're just so pretty. I was like, well, you have to see if you think I'm pretty during the luteal phase. And they're like, what do you mean? Like, I'm sure you've got a bunch of different pictures on your profile. I'm sure they weren't all taken when you were ovulating. Wait, did you take all the pictures when you were ovulating? And I was like, yep, I always do. And they were like, oh my God, what's wrong with you?
So then what did you, is there an end to that story? Were you
Yes, they still do think I'm very attractive still. I passed the test in all 4 phases and they have also passed the test in all 4 phases. I still like them in the luteal phase and it's a very good sign.
I love it.
Oh, that's a great sign.
So good. So you know this.
I want to go back in time right now.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's okay. So you know this, right, Alex? Our audience is anywhere from 20s to 30s, 40s, beyond, right? So we've got women that are listening that are still menstruating, and we have women that are not. So how do you see cycle syncing as relevant and empowering for women at all stages of life?
Yeah, I would love that question. And maybe I'll do like the high level overview of the 4 phases and talk about how it also applies to menopause or people who are having irregular cycles. Because one of the things we talk about in our app is how you can track with the phases of the moon. So there's a lot of theories that before there was non-natural light, most women were in sync with the moon. And so it's a really good way to use the energy and those big fluctuations, those energetic fluctuations if you're not having your own cycle. So our period, that's phase 1. This is like the new moon. So if you don't have a period right now, you could type in the first date of the new moon as your period start date and just say it lasts for 5 days, because that's when like the moon starts to kind of grow back up in the sky. And this is our internal time. This is like our inner winter time. It's a good time to be hibernating. It's a good time for planning. And it's a good time to be a little bit more quiet. There's a lot of physical things going on. And it's kind of a low energetic period because our hormones have depleted and then they start to rise again when our period starts. So that's our new moon time. Then we go to the next phase. That's the follicular phase. This is when estrogen's on the rise, follicle stimulating hormones on the rise. So this is like the waning moon. So when the moon's getting bigger in the sky leading up to the full moon, it's like our inner springtime. So I think of this as the busy bee season. It's time to start doing everything you planned when you were on your period. Good time for networking, good time to meet new people, launching a new project. Estrogen is very protective of the brain. So if you want to try something new that you think could be embarrassing, it's a good time to try it during the follicular phase. Because if you try it during the luteal phase and you hate it, you may not actually really hate it. You may just dislike it because of what's going on in your brain. And so you may not give it the full bang for its buck that it deserves. So I like to try new things during the follicular phase. Ovulation, that's around the full moon time. So think of like the energy is coming up to this big peak and it almost looks like a big egg in the sky, right? It's an easy one to remember. Yeah. It's our inner summertime. So this is a good time for sales, manifesting, and really like having that potency and confidence. And the fun trick about that is when you really can dial in your felt sense of ovulation. I don't do this every day because it would be exhausting, but like I will dial into my felt sense of ovulation when I am not ovulating. If I have a really important sales call or a really important investor meeting, something like that, you can kind of tap into that energy, even if you're not ovulating. So that's another hack for women who are post-menopausal. You'll likely remember what it felt like to be ovulating. And so if you've got something you really want to use that juice for, you can still kind of borrow that, even if you're not ovulating at the time. And then the luteal phase is our inner autumn time. And this is like the waning moon, sorry, waxing is the follicular. So it's when the moon's going back down. This is like our inner autumn time. So it's a good time for analyzing, organizing. This phase gets a bad rap for being kind of like nitpicky or bitchy, but I just call it my CEO energy. Like I was on a dev meeting today and they were trying to give me the runaround. And I was like, absolutely not. That's not what we talked about. I'm in the luteal phase today. I was like, no, that's not what we're doing. And in fact, why wasn't this taken care of 6 months ago? Because we've already paid for this bug to be squashed. And they were just like,
are you in your luteal phase?
So it's just like a good time to be super direct and almost like a little bit more masculine in some ways.
Yeah.
And so that knowing what to do when makes it less overwhelming because you can slot things in at the right time. And, you don't have to do everything every day. You just have to do it when it makes the most sense for you.
And what I love about that, because I'm a big fan of the idea of a 12-week year, right? So you're looking at quarterly, what do you want to accomplish, right? Even you and I, right? We were trained on a 90-day program and being able to think in things like in quarters. But this is even better because it is, you said it's less overwhelming because it's like, I'm only going to be here for a week, especially people who might not enjoy having sort of downtime or that winter space because they've got that inner critic saying you should be doing. If you're thinking to yourself, I don't have the energy to do this and I'm not supposed to, but it's only going to be for a week. And then I've got 2 weeks where I'm like kicking some bad ass. And then I'm going to see what worked and what I'd like to see more of the next time. Then you get to go into the rest. Like, I love this idea of taking it a month at a time, even a week at a time. It feels so in alignment or just like calming.
Yeah. And we even started teaching this business class last year. When we look at the year and the quarters of the year, we look at Q1, like the menstrual phase, Q2 as the follicular phase. So when you think of launching a program, it doesn't really make sense to launch. Like even think of like, I'm from Iowa. I'm a farm kid. Like my families have been farmers on both sides for a long time. When we think of launching something in January, like the ground is frozen. You can't plant seeds when the ground is frozen. It's not actually a great time to be launching something like very highly, because everyone wants to be hibernating, right? So Q1, your period, Q2, follicular phase, Q3 is your ovulation phase, and Q4 is the luteal phase. So this is the time, this is like the harvest time of the year. It's the wrapping up of projects, getting things done, analyzing the whole year. So you can keep doing like this micro and macro level. So you got the high level big quarters, then the week of your own cycle, and see how all of these things intersect in a much more natural way, which just leaves us feeling more energized.
What has shifted for you? Sorry, Carrie, I totally jumped in, but I'm just so curious. What has shifted for you with all of this?
It has given me so much more abundance and peace because before I had started tracking my sales, and then every time I was in the luteal phase, even if I had just onboarded new clients, I was like crying on the floor, convinced that my business would fail and that I was an idiot and like, what was I doing? I should just go back and get a job. And then like a couple weeks later after my period, I'm like, oh my God, I love being a health coach. This is the best job ever. And I can't believe I'm building this company. I'm so proud of myself. And it was like this roller coaster, like jerking me around all the time. And so it doesn't mean those feelings don't come up. Like running any kind of company or organization, putting yourself out there is very risky and vulnerable. But when I do feel like that now in the luteal phase, I'm like, yeah, but it's the luteal phase. So I take it seriously, but not personally. And so that has given me so much more bandwidth back because I understand that these are just cyclical phases. So I don't get derailed in the same way that I might have or did before.
What I love about this is the scientific explanation that sometimes people are way more receptive to than they are to like the idea of limiting beliefs. And I think both can be true, but honestly, I mean, and you know, working for HDI, Alyx and I we would do both inner game and outer game kind of coaching with people. And sometimes it really wasn't about limiting beliefs. It literally was like, you just need a good idea, right? And in this case, it might not be about limiting beliefs. It might literally be your hormones. Let's work with that. And that's what's so brilliant about this is you can help people move pretty quickly into success and flow, literally, not to but like flow in every way, right?
Pun intended.
By like riding that wave, right? So I say wave because I always had a really heavy period, but wish I had a surfboard. But I'm like so amazed by this. It's bringing me back to my high school self. And I'm wondering like what you do with girls who are just on the beginning of that journey, helping them, because wow, I wish I could go back to my high school self and figure that out and not just feel like, here it comes again. Just don't drown.
Yeah, we created a body literacy curriculum. So Anna, my COO, she came on and she has like 16 years in education. And so we had created this body literacy curriculum because we think all boys and girls need to know the information about everyone going through puberty and not just like everyone gets a separate but not equal class, because men are part of the reason they are kind of suck at talking about periods is because they were never taught about periods. And so they feel like they shouldn't be involved. And so that's another big goal that we have, is that people get this information from the very beginning, that they understand how to work with these pieces, because we all know how, like, it's a conversation our team has all the time. My life would be so different now. I started doing this work. I started really tuning in at 27, and I still came to the work really young compared to a lot of people that are getting excited about it now. I think Anna's like, I found out about cycle syncing when I was 37, right? So I even had like a decade on her of like additional time. Like, what if, because my period started when I was 10. So that was almost 17 years of not having the information and just feeling kind of crazy with about a decade of hormonal birth control in the mix there. It's just like, yeah, we believe that we can create a revolution and a movement where all girls, well, all people know about this from the very beginning. And instead of seeing as men as the default for human, we're just like, there are two patterns, there are two cycles, because men also have a cycle. It just lasts 24 hours, right? And we're all cyclical. The cycles are different lengths. And now we can find better ways to have community and compassion for each other, because we just realized we just work a little bit differently. But I think it would change everything.
I mean, yeah. And so I'm having those exact thoughts as we're talking here. I'm full in menopause. I haven't had a period in well, I actually haven't had a period since before I got pregnant with Charlotte, because I had an IUD. So I have not had a period at this point, 19, 20 years, but I don't have the IUD. So I know I'm in menopause, and I'm sitting here kind of like Carrie thinking, well, shit, I wish I knew this sooner, because even with an IUD, I could have used the moon piece, right?
Yeah.
So that's really fascinating. So for our women who are perimenopausal or menopausal, what's important for them? I mean, I'm hearing everything you've said, but is there anything else that you would like to say to our listeners who are perimenopausal or menopausal and say this is still important for you?
I would say, as long as if you still have your ovaries, you are still producing hormones. And so folks are still going through some fluctuations. So if you start to pay attention, there's something so magical about a menstrual cycle practice, because we give ourselves the light of our own loving attention. When you do a cycle check-in, when you spend 5 minutes a day paying attention to your mood, your physiology, your energetic fluctuations, you gain so much information about yourself. And so even if you don't have a period, we'd really recommend that you check out the Agenda Period app and you track your symptoms and you just see, is there anything to get curious about here? I'm actually noticing that I am having some bloating. That's weird. Like, what's going on. And what's really cool about what we released in the app now is when people are tracking their symptoms, we'll recommend products for them in real time to kind of address those symptoms and challenges that they're having in the store. So I would say, even if you do not have a period anymore, this is super vital to do a cycle check-in, to spend 5 minutes with yourself as a friend and be like, hey girl, what's up? Like, how are you doing today? How's your energy? How's your mood? It's something we're so conditioned to not do as women that it feels really counterproductive. But our users have consistently reported when they do that for about 3 months, the relationship to self starts to really change because they're able to see those patterns and trends. Like, it doesn't even take that long. It takes about 3 months of getting really tuned in and really curious. Just like the 90-day program. We got to do more research on this 90-day situation, because like, I don't know what it has to do with habit change, but yeah, it really makes a big difference when over 3 cycles or 3 moon phases, to really understand how are you feeling, because we can't fix anything that doesn't have the light of our loving attention. We can't change anything if we don't even know what's happening.
Yeah.
Again, and not to belabor the point, but this is such a helpful tool for, when Lisa and I were just having a conversation about how do you help people turn attention inward. And sometimes that's overwhelming for people who've been through trauma, who've been through, like how do you get grounded in yourself? And what a great thing to focus on.
Yeah.
What a great way to bring people into themselves by saying, track this. Like, that is actually really comforting.
Yep. And we have our symptom tracker will probably change in the fullness of time, because we'd love to help people do some early identification of perimenopause, because people like thought at one point that they didn't start until their 40s, but really now they're saying perimenopause starts as early as 35, because that's when we're getting some really big hormonal shifts. And so if we can help people identify these things earlier, the research shows they don't have as hard of a transition through menopause. If they understand how to track their cycle and work with their cycle and address those changes really quickly, then they don't have the same kind of challenge. And the symptom tracker makes it really easy. So even if you're not good at journaling, even if you're not good at writing about yourself, there's a couple different categories in there, and you can just like click the buttons and leave a little note to yourself. And that's as easy and quick as it gets. And so we want to make this process so accessible for people, because of all of those reasons, right? Because of the trauma, because of all these things, and encourage women to come back home to themselves and not have such an external focus all of the time.
Oh, I love this. I have a question. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just thinking about COVID and people starting to work from home more. And I'm wondering if that was an opportunity for you to help people. Like, did you see some trends there where people like finally maybe believe, they probably always did, but believe they had time to pay attention to it and kind of adjust the way they work and where they work?
Yeah, so our app came out in kind of like at the tail end of the big bulk of the COVID issue. So we were like, the first iteration came out in like April of 2021. But what the data proved out during COVID is that when women were working from home, the company did not suffer productivity, but it improved mental health. And I would venture to guess, even if it was subconscious, women were taking more time for themselves on their periods. Maybe they were wearing their stretchy pants. Maybe they were doing all these other things, because they were only, like from the tits up, that's all they had to be on for Zoom. So like, you're like, business at the top, sweatpants on the bottom. Like, I am ready to go here. So I'm sure that there was some of this naturally happening, a little bit of these fluctuations of like times of more productivity and less productivity, but they were still able on average to get all of their work done. I'm sure that was happening. And so that is what's available. If employers would understand this, they would have such a more productive workforce, because currently women report, there was a huge study of it, around 50,000 participants. And on average, women are losing or having 9 to 12 days of presenteeism per year, which means they're at work, but they're not actually doing their full capacity. And it's because of their period challenges and symptoms. And so what that equates to in dollars and cents on the lowest end, because I took an average like of $12 per hour to base kind of like average out salaries on both sides of that spectrum, is like $13 billion right off the top of the US economy every year, because women are not being supported. Now, this is, so here really clearly, it's not because women are doing anything wrong, it's because they're not being supported by this system. And then we see that even more, we see the amount of women that leave the workforce around menopause is drastic, because they're going through all of these hormonal changes and shifts, and they're having a discordance with their work environment. but they may be seen as sassy or argumentative or having too many issues. And so what's happening then is institutional knowledge is getting lost in droves, because when you have someone who's been in a career for 20 to 30 years and they leave the workforce, that is a huge blow to the organization. And retraining someone, like taking all the knowledge that lived in their head, is impossible. And so we're, with this gigantic turnover around menopause, we're seeing that there's another, I don't even know how many billions of dollars lost to the US economy because we're not respecting women. Yeah.
Wow.
This is mind blowing. And you and I've had these discussions, and I'm still, my mind is being blown with every single thing you say. But you mentioned, you used the word, I think I heard you use the word a few minutes ago, trauma. And I do think we have all grown up feeling traumatized around having our period, right?
Yes.
I remember when my daughter was younger. I don't remember when I had mine. I think I was like 13. I don't remember when I started, but I do remember obviously when Charlotte was starting to go through all this, and she was so fearful, right? So fearful that she was going to get it at school. What is it going to be like? La 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 la. Are the boys going to know? And there is this, because we have cloaked it in such secrecy and shh, and it's bad and blah blah blah. What have been your challenges with this? Because people are like la 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 la. I don't want to talk about this.
That's such a good question. And I would say, like, on the trauma side, this is something eventually as a health coach, I would love to do a white paper or study, because I actually believe menstrual trauma, this is just, I've never seen any research on this, but I believe menstrual trauma and the high amount of menstrual trauma and anxiety that we carry kind of as a collective leads to hormonal health conditions. Especially if we're starting to look at like epigenetically what's going on, what gets passed down, all of these things in our environment, the scarcity around menstrual products. Women in the developing world lose a year of school compared to their male counterparts because of lack of access to menstrual products, like on and on and on. The unhoused population in the United States lack access to menstrual products, and like the prison system in the United States, women have had to trade sexual favors in order to receive pads, because they're supposed to get a federally mandated amount of like as their supplies, and they never get enough. Like they'll get enough for one pad per day. I'm like, that's not enough.
No.
I used to go through those in an hour.
Exactly. Right. And just like, yeah, there's just like all of these horrendous things. So I definitely think that this trauma is passed on early, and all of these anxieties just really create this big issue for us. Now I got lost in the sauce. What was the original
No,
question?
that was thank you for saying that piece of it for sure. My question was, what challenges do you come up against in trying with women around this?
Yeah. So men are obviously kind of like the most ignorant overall, especially like on the investor side, or just like some of the weird questions. But then men are also the most enthusiastic once they understand it, because they're like, that's such a cool tool for biohacking. Can you tell me how to biohack myself? And I'm like, sorry, Steven, like go figure that out on your own. I'm building a whole company over here. Like I don't have time to figure that out for you. But women can have consistently, especially like as they age, they'll say stuff like, if they see us at a booth or expo, like, oh, I don't have to deal with that anymore. Or thank God I got my uterus hacked right out of there. Thank God I don't have to deal with her anymore. And I'm just like, to me, it would, the one-to-one would be like, we would never tell men that they need to get castrated because they're having a hormonal health condition. Like we understand how pivotal testosterone is to the male experience. So when are we, it's a barbaric thing to be like, kind of, this is your course of action now. And women are like, well, it's because I was in so much pain for 15 years. I'm like, yeah, babe, you should not have fallen through the cracks for 15 years.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's a lot of trauma where women don't want to talk about it at all. They don't see it as anything positive. They have, a lot of times we hear stuff like, well, the pain is just normal. My doctor told me that. I'm like, the pain's very common. It's not normal. But I think if you have given up, you've lost so much of your life to something, it's hard to then change the way that you think about it, because then that's admitting you could have been having a different experience all along. And that's very sad. And there's a lot of grief that comes up in that experience. And so we just have so much compassion. I'm like, yeah, the world. And also, if we think about the mind-body connection, if women have so much anxiety, hatred, and distrust of their bodies during just even the week of their period, it equates to about 8 to 10 years of your life when you're actually bleeding. And so think of that as a systemic tool of the patriarchy to get women to be less active participants in their lives if they hate themselves for that many years, for almost a decade. That's a very powerful tool for disenfranchisement.
I was just feeling sad and feeling little bits of grief from my younger self when I would feel less than, right? Like I'm just not
Mm.
myself. I'm not my full self. But like I wish I could go back and say to that younger version of me, you are your full self. This is your full self in this phase,
Hmm.
and take more
Yes, your
credit and
full self in
celebrate
this
more,
phase.
that you're your full self when things are all always going well. You weren't just lucky or in a good mood. So it's like
Yeah,
see that as your full self going through natural cycles. I was just
yeah.
wondering too about, I'm guessing because this is such a big, yeah, I'm sure you hear it all the time, and Lisa and I hear it all the time, and we talk about it. Huge piece of this journey of being a woman through perimenopause and menopause is sleep, figuring out sleep. And I'm guessing this really helps people get ahead of like and kind of take some more like power back on how they sleep.
Yeah, it's also like all of the scientific research has been done on male bodies. So I just saw last year, I think for the first
I
time,
know.
like, hey, women actually need more sleep than men, in case you didn't know that, because all the recommended sleep studies were based on men and
Yeah,
how they
Shocking.
because of menstrual cycles, they decided it was too
yes,
complicated to study
Yep.
female brains.
yes.
Yep.
They say we're too, like, literally the phrase is your hormones are too pesky.
Yep.
So like we can't put you. I'm like, but isn't your job to be literal scientist? Like, couldn't you figure out how to do that anyway? Can you like create a control somehow? I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but like you guys are way
Our
smarter than me,
hormones are part of
supposedly.
our brain. It's
Yeah.
part of our brain.
Exactly.
It's how it
Yeah.
works.
Yeah. So we definitely need more sleep during different times of the cycle. And that does not change when, if you're having these big changes of estrogen or progesterone, it's going to mean you need more sleep. And so the permission to give yourself a nap, well, I finally started doing that when I've been building this company, because I always thought lazy, unproductive, unmotivated. How could you? What's wrong with you? All that nasty stuff that goes on in our heads. When I finally just give myself a 20 to 30-minute nap, I get so much more done, especially in the luteal phase. Like I need more sleep.
Yeah.
And so creating
God.
your schedule in that way, giving yourself that permission changes everything about our productivity.
I just keep
So,
thinking like this is such the answer, right? Because
yeah.
it's because I think Lisa and I, we often assume, as you get older, you'll realize this is temporary, this is temporary. But this could teach young people like really important lesson that like everything is temporary, everything's cyclical, and like really kind of to mature and grow up with that awareness and that proof. Mm.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I have used it
it's
so much
amazing.
as my spiritual practice, because like let's say, because like our, like we look at our period as the health report card. Like if I've got terrible cramps, if I'm really heavy bleeding, it's like cues me into some things. Maybe I didn't get enough sleep, maybe I traveled too much, I was drinking too much alcohol or too much caffeine or whatever the case may be. And then the reminder to let it go and to say like I've got another cycle, I've got 12 to 13 times a year to practice this, I can try again. And it's such a forgiving practice to go through the world. And it's a really beautiful way to look at, it's just a phase. I'm going to take it seriously, but not personally. And I'm going to try again next month. Yeah, it's magical.
I just was watching and this my husband was blown away by this, but I watched Annie Hall for the first time last night, and there's a couple of different times where Woody Allen says, "You're probably just on your period." And both times she's like, "I'm not on my period." But like even that, like educating boys and men that this is not something to throw at us, right? Because that's what it, again, when I think about the trauma of this, it's the, nah, she's just on her period. She's a bitch because she's on her period. Like if you're constantly being told that, even if you don't have good self-worth, you can't help but those stories still get in your brain, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
I want to clarify something here because we talked about it being a physical product and you've mentioned it being an app. I know both of those, but does the physical product still exist?
We relaunched it this year.
That's
So
right. You did tell
yes.
me that.
And we also created a journal. So our original was a planner. And so we've relaunched that because it was too hard to do both. Like when we pivoted into tech, because at that time there was no like drop shipping of physical products. So we had to like have them on hand. I literally had like hundreds of planners in my garage. And I'm like, I can't do all of this. There's too much going on right now. But I don't love Amazon, but they did create drop shipping. So even for
Yeah.
print on demand. And so we redesigned the agenda planner. And then we also made a journal. So for young girls who maybe they don't need to plan, but they want to get into that practice of doing a cycle check-in. So this is a really beautiful thing for mothers and daughters to do together, is like,
Yeah.
get the journal, and maybe you get the planner for yourself, and every day you're spending 5 minutes together doing your cycle check-in. So yes, they are available, and it's really, really important. It was more of like a gut thing. I don't know. It was like in September. I was like, Anna, we have to relaunch the planner and journal. Can you redesign everything? And she's like, sure. Yeah, why not? And then the election happened, and it's really important. I mean, I can tell you all day long what our security protocols are, the way we're building this. We have a white paper on what third parties we work with and why. We've talked about all of that on the safety security side. We're constantly looking for new ways to bifurcate data and keep user information safe. But ultimately, everyone has to understand their risk profile right now. And if you do not feel safe using a period app, please keep tracking your period, but use something like the Agenda Period Planner. It's got all the content in there. We've laid it out really beautifully. The design is so nice. And it's an option. It's like, I understand why people don't want to be doing these things right now, but it is the most important time in the history, maybe, of our planet, to be tracking your cycle and understanding all of your phases. Because if you need to make a decision with your health provider, the time you have is limited. And so the sooner that you know what you need to do, the better of a chance you're going to have for a successful outcome.
So that was my next question. That's where I was going with the physical piece of it. Because yeah, I mean, there's, in case our listeners don't know, right? There was a lot of buzz, continues to be, and buzz almost makes it sound cute, but there's a lot of information out there, a lot of things around Project 2025 and the possibility of tracking periods as part of a larger surveillance effort. I know. Again, if you're not watching YouTube right now, the three of us heads are about to pop right off of our shoulders. So
Well, we used to think things were ridiculous, and nothing. I
I
don't know.
mean, it's
Nothing maybe should surprise
1984.
me.
I know, I
Yeah.
know, I know. And so, okay, so I want to circle back around with that context, that there is a fear that tracking our periods could be part of a larger surveillance effort. Say again, both options. You've obviously got the paper option, so that's in
Yes.
your hand. You can still do this, but say again how your security efforts with the app itself.
Yeah, so I'll say a couple things first. Even during the Trump administration, the first time when Dobbs was overturned, they have yet to subpoena records, and
Okay.
part of that is because they don't think women are smart enough to track their menstrual cycle accurately, and so there has yet to even really be a clinical research where they have accepted period tracking app data, because they just think we're too dumb to understand. It's even like when
Working in
you're
our effort. It works for us this time though.
Thank you. Yes, we're
Yeah.
just so dumb. We just don't even understand anything. We're just dumb little girls. Like, I'm just a girl. How would you expect me to track
For
my period?
real.
I was just like, even when I got pregnant, I was like, do you want, she's like, okay, when's the date of your last period? I was like, do you want the date of conception? And she's like, you don't know that. It was like, but I do know that. So I can tell you, because I've had sex one time in 2020, and that's when I got pregnant. I can tell you the exact day if you want me to. Just like, date of your last menstrual period is fine. So like, they consider you pregnant like 2 weeks before an egg even dropped, is how they calculate the date of birth. So
it's a good point.
yeah, so like when you say you are 6 weeks pregnant, you're really only at most 3 weeks past implantation at most,
Mm.
Okay.
because they're calculating it from your last period. So it takes
Right.
the 2 weeks ish up until ovulation. And then after an egg is fertilized outside of the fallopian tubes, it still takes another 5 to 6 days to travel down into the uterus. And then it can take 3 to 4 days to implant into the uterus, because everyone likes to think of the uterus as this beautiful, fluffy pillow. It's not. It is inhospitable intentionally, because they're like, this is a parasite that's coming to attack and ruin our lives. And I'm like, not untrue. I mean, I love my children, but also not untrue. Their parasitic nature has yet to cease, and they are 4 years old officially. So like, you're really like barely even pregnant by the time all of these. So like, if people would even understand, like, it's just so annoying from that perspective. So yeah, they don't trust us to track our own data, which I think is great news. But if you still do not feel comfortable, you have options like paper. And what we are doing, again, we have published everything to talk about what third parties we're using and why. We want our app to be very, very personalized. And the only way something gets to be personalized is if there's a feedback loop with information. And so you can't have both things. You can't have it be extremely personalized and also extremely lock and key, because that requires a feedback loop. And so people just have to understand where they are at in their cycle. And this is what my recommendation to you would be. If you have a period, you have an app that you're using, and you find out somehow your period did not return, do not change the date in your app. Just let it keep pre-populating and do the things that you need to do to bring your period back to yourself. Don't change the date. Like no one's gonna even know on like, you have to like change it. Otherwise, all the apps, they're on an algorithm. So they're pre-programmed to keep being like, Lisa, your period started today. You're like, yes, it did.
No, it didn't.
It definitely started today. You don't have to let the app know. She will be never the wiser. Just let it keep running. And maybe it's actually a great strategy. Like, no, see, my app's logging my periods all of the time. And then this is also not to make people more scared, but it's important to have the information. The thing that they have been looking at more is geotagging location. And this is on because of the Google Maps. And it doesn't actually matter if your phone is turned off, because even if your phone is in airplane mode, it still collects geo pins. So if you're like, I'm gonna be real slick and turn my phone on airplane mode so I can cross the border into Illinois and go to a clinic that I need to go to, it will, if they were going, and again, they have not persecuted anyone yet based on that cell tower data, but it wouldn't matter if your phone was off. I think the only way to have it not track is to remove the battery, which I don't even think you can do that on an iPhone anymore. Or like leave it at home, but then they'll be like, this seems suspicious. Why you weren't doing any of your normal travel patterns? And so in some ways, some of this stuff is so far out of the box that we have to go analog with it. So while we'll continue to build an app and continue to push for a world where no one needs to be worried, it's really important that we keep, because like there's too many other things. It's really, we can blame the period apps, but it's not even really about the period apps anymore. It's about all of these other geographical tagging that happens through our cellular devices. We are so monitored right now. And you have to even just like, you have to like say, it is what it is. Or you have to say like, I'm going to go completely off the grid, because anything that you interact with, every single profile that's free, every Facebook, Instagram, they're constantly collecting data on us. So you have to either decide, are you okay with that or not okay with that? And there's like that risk benefit analysis in our everyday lives, because some of the reasons people love period apps is it makes it super accessible, especially if you're neurodivergent or you have any kind of disability. It can be a lot easier to track on an app than to track on paper. So you just have to kind of know, and we're going to be one of the only companies I've heard talking really honestly about it, because everyone's like, we'll keep your stuff safe. I'm like, not against a subpoena from the US government. There's not a company on this planet stronger than the United States government. And that's just the reality.
The thing that strikes me though, as you're saying all of this, is there's something around empowerment of women. So the fact that you know this stuff about your body and your state, not like Ohio, not your physical state, but like the fact that you are so tuned in to your own body, there's such power there that I also feel this real sense of, as you do this, you are going to feel more powerful than ever to still do what the fuck you need to do.
Absolutely. Women are only fertile for about 5 to 6 days a month. And so, first of all, please stop sleeping with people who vote against your own interests.
Snaps.
Please don't do that. But if you're going to do that, please be very careful not to sleep with them when you're ovulating. Like don't, like when we
don't
know
propagate that.
we're powerful. When we know, so I got scared. I got scared like everyone else when we saw the response from the election. And also I'm tired of waiting for politicians to get their heads out of their fucking asses.
100%.
Like, women have to create spaces of community safety where we can talk about these things together, where we can get advice from other women, and we can stop waiting on people who clearly hate us to make better policies. Why? Like, I'm going to always vote. I'm always going to do my civic duty. And then also we're going to create networks with each other that we can get this information to the people who need it, because I'm not going to keep waiting on politicians to actually care about me as a person.
Yep.
Or as a gender.
As a gender.
Yeah.
I love that you just mentioned neurodivergence. I have a neurodivergent son, and actually it's different, but tracking seizures is so helpful for him. It helps him be more independent and have more agency. And I have other, friends and other moms in my community with young women who like they rely on things like this. So I want to make sure they know about it. But really, truly, it's incredible for a woman on the spectrum or a woman like who, has a neurodivergent profile for
Yeah.
her or her caregivers to have access to something like this has been a game changer, I've noticed. And I'm just so grateful that it exists.
Yeah, I got diagnosed officially with ADHD in October of 2023. And I realized that was part of why I had like pretty intense luteal phases. And just even knowing that I have ADHD allowed me to get different tools and just be like, because like ADHD is like a comorbidity with the luteal phase. So like you can have high rates of PMDD, high rates of suicidal ideation. Luckily, I didn't suffer from that side of it, but definitely more negative thinking, more anxiety or depression during that time because of the way that estrogen supports serotonin and dopamine in the brain. And so when you lose, like when we kind of bottom out on estrogen, it can be even really a lot harder to show up in your life, which is probably why I was always on the floor crying during the luteal phase before I knew all of these things. So even just understanding that and advocating potentially for higher doses of medication, talking to your practitioner about additional resources, it's so important and it's so new. It's super, super new. Like people are barely coming onto the scene of understanding how much more these different neurodivergencies are definitely impacted by the menstrual cycle. So there's a lot more research to do, and I'm excited to see what comes out in the field over the next decade.
Amazing.
I guess the next question I sort of have thinking about, I mean, first off, can we just presence the fact that you fucking know your shit, like inside and out? What an absolute honor to have you here and talking about this. This is blowing my goddamn mind.
Thank you so much.
Oh my God. And for someone who's listening to this, who's like, yeah, fuck yeah, 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 yeah. And shit, where do I begin? Like, is there a small step that could enter them into this process?
Yeah, we always say the very first step is that cycle check-in. So download the app or get a piece of paper. Again, if you don't want to use the app, it's no big deal. Grab our journal and just start spending 5 minutes a day checking in with your energy. I like from the health coaching side, I like to recommend people do it at the same time because I think we can feel really different in the morning than at night. And so either way, pick your time of day and just commit, put a little timer and just spend 5 minutes for yourself, tracking what's going on and getting curious. And then because once you put the light on it, you'll be able to see what's going wrong. And then maybe you can fix one thing at a time. We've got so many resources in the app. So you can also even use the app to not track your period, but just to read all of the resources that are in there. The version that's out right now is free, and all the features that are on there will be free forever, right? So you don't have, there's nothing that says you have to log your period information in there, but just even understanding, okay, I'm having these symptoms. What does that mean for me? What does that mean about what my body needs? And then you can go about solving them one step at a time. So when I postpartum really got back into my health and fitness journey, it was like, okay, all I have the capacity for is making sure I walk 20 minutes a day. And I'm going to do that every day. And I would just walk laps around my house, at the inside of my house, because I was like, that's all I have the capacity for right now. And then after that kind of set in, I was like, okay, I'm going to add weights 2 days a week, right? It's the same kind of thing with the cycle stuff. Just start tracking it, even if that's all you do for 3 months. And then be like, okay, I'm noticing I'm not having great bowel movements or I'm too bloated. Okay, I'm going to add in more fiber. That's going to be the very one step. And really, as we focus on adding things in, those bad habits fade away. The things that are not serving us will fade away, but we only get to know that when we're paying attention. So it's definitely step 101. Just check in with your cycle, do a little cycle check-in.
I have a question I meant to ask earlier, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
I was really irregular, like continued to be so. How does the app help people like that who are like, mine don't come every 21 days? Sometimes mine would come, every like 14 days, and sometimes it would be more like 30. How does it help people who kind of think like, I'm not regular?
Yeah, so right now it's not super responsive to those changes, but at least you're able to track it and you're starting to see those patterns. And then if you're also tracking other environmental things, so I don't know what your life or job circumstances were like when you were doing that, but here's like a crazy one. A lot of women we see at conferences are like, my period just started and it's so irregular. Like I didn't know why. I wasn't supposed to have my period for a week. Well, things like travel can drop if you get really stressed out when you're traveling, it can drop progesterone and it can cause your period to start early. So people say like, you never start your period early or late. It just happens to do with ovulation. except for if you've normally ovulated, then you are in the luteal phase and then something super stressful happens, it can cut out progesterone and that can cause your period to start early. So if you're tracking that, maybe it was something to do with an environmental factor like alcohol or caffeine or travel, right? So if you're starting to understand what are those different pieces, then you can say, oh crap, every time I'm traveling, my period comes a week early. How can I arrange my trips differently? Or at least at the bare minimum, maybe my travel schedule can't change at all. I'm going to make sure I pack the stuff with me that I need to survive that work trip when I am having an early period. And so again, it's just like this awareness allows us to plan, because people say that to me all the time, Alyx, this is really cool, but I can't do it. My life's too crazy. No one cares about my menstrual cycle. Never going to happen. Cool. I understand that. Maybe you're not able to change. You don't have that flexibility, but you can build in resources to wrap around yourself, even if you can't change anything at all. So maybe that means you're going to order out more during the luteal phase. You save up your money and you're like, I'm going to, for that week, every night we're doing Uber Eats because I am not cooking. Or like, I'm going to send my kids to my mom's house because please, mom, for all of us staying alive, please come get my children, right? Like who else can you call in your care team? What can you get into your schedule? What are those health non-negotiables that could have likely balanced out, or at least helped you see the pattern? And then you would have known other things. Okay, it really does happen every time I drink too much alcohol. I'm not going to drink alcohol during that phase, because women get more hungover if they drink during their period, because we don't metabolize alcohol as quickly ever, but especially not in our period, because our bodies are doing such other heavy physical lifting, right? So just when you start to know these pieces, you can make these tiny tweaks that can really balance out what's going on in the hormones, because that kind of irregularity indicates to me that there was a hormonal issue going on. Maybe that was stress, maybe that was something in your diet, in your environment. But again, if we're not taught to connect those pieces, because we are taught that these systems are not interconnected. But what we know as health coaches, from top to bottom, from your brain to your toes, it is all an interconnected feedback loop. And so if we want to improve the menstrual cycle, we have to like see where things are getting caught in that internal loop and then work to fix those problems.
Charlotte literally just, and I don't know if you saw me sit back and go, oh my God, because Charlotte is pretty regular. She's usually the beginning of the month, and she just had it. And we're, midway through the month now, and she just had it again. And she said to me, she's like, what happened? I was like, oh, no. Well, now I know. I mean, she's had, as Carrie well knows, has had a very stressful couple of weeks, couple of months, really. And I bet it has to be why. And now I can tell her. So yay.
Yep. The progesterone just bottoms out, because progesterone, what its job is to keep the uterine lining in place until the placenta takes over. So that's its job. And when your body finds out that it's not pregnant, that nothing implanted in your uterine lining, that's when it sheds everything. And so if you're at such high stress that it drops progesterone, this is a cue to your body. It's not safe to be pregnant right now. Let's flush everything out. Yeah.
Wow.
And again, because women are all impacted by this differently, like my cycle, she's tried and true. Doesn't matter how stressed I am. She's coming right on time. I'm like, thank you. Sometimes I wish you'd come early or later. I don't know. But she's like, nope, doesn't matter. Sorry.
But I used to say if I wanted to get my, sorry, go ahead. Finish.
I was just going to say, it's just like, that's part of why when we track, we can know what some people are just more sensitive to those changes than other people. And so they just need different supports.
Wow.
I was starting to say, sorry, my sound cut out, so I didn't realize I was talking over you. I was going to say, I used to say I should just plan a trip, because every time I got on a plane, I would get it, like every single time. So,
there you go.
Yeah.
So you must be highly impacted by the stress of travel. And so then that just drops your progesterone levels.
I thought it was something about elevation, because I grew up flying. My dad was a pilot, so I was never stressed about it. So I just assumed it was something like elevation. I don't know.
And it might be. I've never seen a study on it, because they don't study it. So LOL. It also could be like the cabin pressure.
Wow. So many things I could ask you about, because I'm fascinated and I want all my nieces to listen to this, and my boys actually. You brought a favorite song, I think but you have a favorite song, and you chose "Woman" by Kesha. So I was curious why that song resonates with you, and if you have a favorite line.
just like, even like, I'm a motherfucking woman. It's just like, that's it, you know, like that's, here we are.
Done and done.
Done and done. That song is just so, so powerful to me, because I heard someone talk, actually, it was a man that talks about it. It was like, men can be so terrible because, and they're like constantly chasing things on this earth because they are not the creative life force. So men are building big ships and they're starting wars and they're trying to create all of these things out in the world because of this like lack mentality. Like they are not the goddess among us. Like, women literally birth the life of this planet. And so I think that's why, you know, like the patriarchy it partly exists. There's like a lot of jealousy there that you can't just create magic from your body. Yeah, I 3D print humans. Like, what the fuck can you do, John? Yeah, let's see. What can you do? Okay. Thank you. Enough said.
I mean,
so I just like
this magic portal. This
portal like into, yes. And so like I love that song because I'm like, I think she wrote that song during the luteal phase. Like, it feels very luteal energy to me. And so it's just a song that I've got to interface with some of the coolest and also worst people building this company. And it's just a good reminder to be like, I know what I'm here for. I know the power of our bodies, and I know the power that women bring to the planet. And so it's definitely on my, it's an older song, but it's constantly in my rotation when I need a pump it up moment.
That song reminds me of a song I had not
grateful.
ever heard before the election, but I heard it on a TikTok, which is, and it's ancient. Keep Your Head Up by Tupac. Same thing, like that idea of like, we're the ones creating life, and yet men are giving us bad names, and they're calling us, and they're teaching their sons to hate us. And it's just, it makes no sense. But what does in this world?
Not a lot right now, besides the menstrual cycle. The menstrual cycle is a great map to your own personal sovereignty and freedom. So please track your menstrual cycle.
I love it.
Alyx, you are doing amazing work. I am so grateful that you're here doing this work. I wish I knew about you in high school, but you weren't even born yet. I'm thrilled to know, and I just want to repeat that I'm thrilled to know that I can still do this, and it can be really empowering. I think that's such an important takeaway here, and and I just want to encourage anyone listening to really trust that your body has rhythms for you to learn from and succeed with. So thank you.
Thank you
Yeah,
so
and
much.
then I think I'd add again, so many women have this internalized misogyny, right? And this hatred of their body. And when they have their period, they hate it. They hate, quote unquote, hate it. And if listening to this episode even starts to turn the wheel where you realize that your body is glorious and it has all the answers for you, if you're just willing to listen, and this is your tools, both the physical version, which it sounds like you can get on Amazon, as well as the app, can be the thing that starts this love affair with your body that doesn't end when you go into menopause. I mean, I don't know. Right now, like, hell, we built this whole podcast on having no fucks left to give, and that's one of the beautiful things around menopause. Can you just very clearly, we'll be putting up obviously all these links in our social media when this episode drops, but what is it called on Amazon? What can they buy? And what is the app called? Just very clearly.
Yep. So if you go to our website, www.theagendaperiod.com, all spelled out, the app links are there. That's a really easy way to make sure you find that. We're at The Agenda Period on Instagram, Facebook, all of that kind of stuff. And then on Amazon, if you search The Agenda with a period, like a dot, then it comes up, and I'll definitely send links over for everybody, but then you can see the planner and the journal. We're just kind of like I'm at The Agenda Period on TikTok, talking shit over there. So if you want to come hang out, you can come hang out with us on TikTok. But really, we're just here to have hard conversations in a fun way, because we think that this can be super fun. It doesn't have to be so serious. It doesn't have to be so mysterious. We can get our partners involved. Like, my partner, he said, is so funny. He's like, yeah, no, really, like I've come to understand, like, it's like dating 4 different people throughout the month. And if you don't love and know how to interact with all those different people, you're going to constantly be failing as a man. Like,
wow.
And so just like,
love that.
to understand that there are techniques that work sometimes and there are techniques that doesn't work. And it's actually like, if you're trying to love somebody, that's your responsibility to like clue into those things and to start to understand those rhythms and patterns. And I was like, yeah, like I am like 4 different people, and not in a way like, oh, we don't want to perpetuate like, oh, you're so crazy. No, it's just like, we're really different because of the way our brain interacts with these chemicals and hormones in a good way. And I think it, because like we can highlight the benefits of each and every phase of the cycle, right? We can understand ourselves in this way. And so, yeah, come hang out with us at the agenda period, wherever on the internet. And we're just really excited to be doing this work. And it feels like a real gift every day to be building this company because of the things women tell us in real time about understanding their bodies, coming home to themselves. It's just very exciting.
And how fortunate that we get to be 4 different people. Dan just gets to be one. I wanted to do
Exactly.
that man name thing. That was
Yeah,
funny.
Dan.
Dan only
So
gets to be one person.
I like would love to do a skit like that where it's just like you know, corporate America, if it was like reverse, it's like, yeah, but like he's really kind of limited in his thinking, you know, he just like comes with the same ideas every single time, versus like if you ask me during the luteal phase, I'm gonna have a lot of creative ideas that I didn't have in the follicular phase. And just like, Dan, on your performance review, like how could you be more expansive in terms of
Spontaneous.
like spontaneous? Like you just really do the same thing every day. And I just feel like that may not be a great fit for our company culture, you know, not really a creative thinker. And it's just like, if we like started flipping
Switch it up.
switch it up a little bit, you know, like maybe go study with Susan and see what she does during ovulation. I think you could learn a lot from her. Just
That is brilliant. That's a great SNL skit. I was actually
oh my gosh,
thinking of my own husband being kind of good at that, like figuring that out, like kind of watching me first with like a sweet smile.
He's an OBGYN. Like he knows
he's an
things.
OB.
Yeah.
Yeah. But even then, it wasn't really about his education. It was about learning from me, you know, a lot. He'll say that all the time. Midwives love to work with him, and nurses, because, you know, he was raised by a nurse, and, you know, he takes a lot of time, and that's always what he's done. It's kind of like paying attention to where I'm at before he like comes at me, you know, with something like, okay,
smart.
So I'm noticing
Very
this.
Smart.
And I'm thinking like what you just said, that's maybe he does be like, oh, she's in this phase. Who knows? I do want to just say we will. Yes. For those listening, these links will be in the show notes, and you know, throughout the week that this drops, there will be a lot of posts that Lisa puts out that links you to this. But please go check out Alyx. I wish everybody would. It's amazing.
This has been an amazing hour. Thank you
so much. Yeah, thank you for sharing your story and your wisdom. And everyone listening, I really hope you feel inspired to start exploring just the power of understanding your own cycles. I know I do.
Yay. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This has been a brilliantly fun conversation. So thank you so much.
Oh my God. Thank you for being here. And until next week, everyone, thanks for listening. Bye.